Welcome to the many interpretations of Muttaburrasaurus. Muttaburrasaurus is an ornithopod that lived in the early Cretaceous of what is now Australia, and coincidentally, it's my favorite Australian dinosaur, which kind of makes it a little bit odd that it took us this long to finally get to it, but it's neither here nor there, I guess. Anyway, elephant in the room, of course, Muttaburrasaurus has gone through quite a significant change as of late. There was a paper published weeks ago that basically reanalyzed the skull that we already have had for Muttaburrasaurus, as well as like additional pieces of the skull. And it seems that Muttaburrasaurus had a longer snout than we previously thought, which means that pretty much any other Muttaburrasaurus reconstruction before that paper is out of date. And that includes everything on this list. So we're mainly just going to be talking about these reconstructions through, I guess, mostly like an artistic standpoint. Obviously, I'll sprinkle in some information about Muttaburrasaurus as we currently know it, so that you guys can learn something. But since nothing here is going to be up to date, it's going to be an interesting video, that's for sure. But without further ado, let's just get right into it. We'll go ahead and start off with the land before time. So there is a Muttaburrasaurus child right here known as Mutt. We also see an adult in the movie as well, which is interesting. I never put two and two together and realized that these guys were meant to be Muttaburrasaurus, which is a very cool inclusion. I love Muttaburrasaurus. You can't go wrong with that. Oddly enough, it actually kind of seems like it's a little bit more up to date, at least the adult is. Because you'll notice his snout is a little bit more elongated as opposed to like reduced, like the older reconstructions, with a bump towards the back of the snout as opposed to towards the front. That is something that we have learned with the recent analyses that have been done, is that the snout of Muttaburrasaurus is a little bit longer than we previously thought. Obviously, Muttaburrasaurus is quite famous for having that really bumpy nose. Initially, it was believed that those were made up of the nasal bones, and hence why it was placed towards the front of the snout. But ever since it was noted that the snout is a bit longer than we previously thought, it seems like that bump is not made out of the nasal bones, and therefore it sits a little bit more like farther back on the snout, kind of where it's placed right here. Though obviously it's stylized, it was like a stylized interpretation from Muttaburrasaurus in general. But in the long run, it's a little bit closer. Though the nostrils are still likely set a little bit too far back, but that's a good start, I'd say. That might be the closest that we'll get in this list. Next up is Muttaburrasaurus, Life in Gondwana. This is a cool little documentary that talks about early Cretaceous Australia, and it has a huge highlight on Muttaburrasaurus. It's stop motion, so it's always really cool to see stop motion. And I love the way that these Muttaburrasauruses look, especially like the adults with the blue and the orange coloration that they have. It's a nice color choice. Obviously, those are complementary colors, so they go quite well together. But it's like a nice kind of like almost vibrant coloration that you very seldom saw in earlier reconstructions of these animals. Typically, they were portrayed as a bit more drab and dull, but this is a nice route to take. Now, I would say that this one's actually a little bit more accurate to our like previous understanding of Muttaburrasaurus, in the fact that obviously that bump kind of like makes up the nasal region, and its snout is a little bit more reduced, which means that it seems to be pretty dang accurate for the time. They did a very good job in that department. Also, the baby is adorable. Oh, and it does have a beak present. Muttaburrasaurus most likely did have a beak as well, something that they would use to snip at vegetation. Obviously, I'm sure that because these guys were herbivores, if you didn't know. After that is the iconic Walking with Dinosaurs Muttaburrasaurus. This one is again a very iconic interpretation of the animal. The green coloration with the mixture of yellows is something that's very eye-catching, and of course, the skull shape is very reminiscent to the older reconstructions of the animal. Therefore, it seems to be pretty accurate for the time. Now, they are shown kind of like using that bump on their nose as a sort of resonating chamber, which was the common thought for a lot of experts. Like that was basically the belief for a very long time. And it might still very much be true, but now that we know that it's kind of like its own independent structure and not a part of the nasal region, it's a little bit harder to say. Because the thought process was, if that was a modified nasal region, then it's likely they can like blow air through their nostrils, of course, to create these really loud noises. But now that it seems a little bit more unlikely that that was the nasal region, it's just we have a little bit more uncertainty. I'm sure it's still possible that they would use that bump to create larger noises, but I'd just say that we're uncertain right now. Either way, I really like these guys. They are portrayed as being like going back and forth between quadrupedal and bipedal locomotion. It seems like Muttaburrasaurus was mostly a bipedal animal, sticking to its hind legs for the majority of the time, only going down to all four limbs to like get a drink of water or to eat some lower vegetation. But still, I really like these guys. These guys, it kind of feels like these guys set the standard for like most other Muttaburrasaurus reconstructions going forward. Then we have Dinosaur King. And again, this is, an outdated interpretation of the animal. It has like the bump that's towards the end of the snout, more like the nasal portion. It's quadrupedal. Again, that's a bit more outdated. And I mean, all of the proportions seem to be in line with what you would expect from a Muttaburrasaurus reconstruction at this time. But it's pretty thin, got like a thin neck and everything going on. It's certainly not bad for the time. And then after that, we have dinosaurs in the outback. We're getting a little bit more recent with these reconstructions, and I really like the way that these guys look. They're CGI models that are just incredibly beefy. Like they're very bulky animals, which kind of makes sense for an animal of Muttaburrasaurus's size, which at this time was already pretty huge. I think about like 8 meters in length. But some more recent size estimates seem to imply that it might have been like on par with Tyrannosaurus Rex, which I'm not too sure how likely that would have been. But I guess that's just something to keep in mind, I suppose. The coloration is really nice. You got like these really popping, like orange coloration with some like white spots. It just looks really good. I quite like it. And then the most recent and one of the most glorious designs out there is Dead Sounds, Dinosauria Muttaburrasaurus from the most recent episode, the episode that came out like a week before the paper dropped. I still love this one. I think that David did an incredible job at designing Muttaburrasaurus right here. It's got a lot of bulk to it in a way that makes it feel like a real animal. Got a little bit more of a beefy neck. They are completely bipedal. And of course, they have like a really nice coloration. I love the contrast between the nose and the rest of the body. It just really helps that nose pop. Obviously, the interpretation is very similar to Walking with Dinosaurs in the fact that it uses that nose to create these louder noises, which, to reiterate, is not something we're too certain about. Some believe that it did, some believe that it didn't. I believe we probably need more data. But this just looks fantastic. I mean, what else could you expect? Dead Sound always does amazing with these creatures, and the Muttaburrasaurus is certainly no exception. I still absolutely love this design right here. Honorable mention is Yoshi from Mario. Now, obviously, it's like Yoshi is like a fictional dinosaur in the Mario universe. But whenever anyone asks me what dinosaur I think Yoshi is most like, I always told them Muttaburrasaurus because he's bipedal, he's got a reduced snout and like a bulbous nose, which very much fits the now earlier out of date reconstruction of Muttaburrasaurus. Obviously, that doesn't hold up now, so I rescind my interpretation that Yoshi resembled a Muttaburrasaurus. Now I kind of think he looks like a Gryposaurus or something like that. But I just wanted to put him here. Again, I don't think he was intentionally designed to be a Muttaburrasaurus, but that was always just my thought process. Then we move on to the video games, starting off with Jurassic Park 3 Park Builder. We have this gray coloration right here and a very, very thin Muttaburrasaurus. Very thin in the body, very thin in the neck. The neck seems very long as well, but it seems like it does have its bump on its nose, which is, again, in line with older reconstructions. So yeah, it just kind of seems like it's starving a bit. All right, now we have Jurassic World Evolution 3, one of my favorite dinosaurs in the game. Again, now it's obviously outdated a little bit because of the recent paper, but before that, I would say it was probably one of the most accurate dinosaurs in this game. Because it applied practically everything we knew about Muttaburrasaurus down to a T. The skull shape is very much correct to that older interpretation, with this bump being towards the nasal bones. Again, now we know that the snout would come out a little bit more out here, and the bump was, sitting a little bit farther back, with the nostrils a little bit further up here. But they still look really good, and now you can like see them as like a I guess more of a retro interpretation of Muttaburrasaurus. This one looks really cool with the blue. Like they're not really skinny or anything like that. They're completely bipedal, which is correct. And they still look like a fairly good ornithopod reconstruction. And they are noisy. I'll tell you that. They are noisy, that's for sure. But I still like them. I still like them. They're going to be like a really cool thing that we can look at as something that, used to be, I suppose. Now it's time for my favorite game, that being Prehistoric Kingdom. Same thing applies, the same thing that we talked about with Jurassic World Evolution 3, and pretty much like most other designs on this list, it's now like basically outdated because the snout is too small. Again, it should come out about right here, with the nostrils being set a little bit further forward and the bump being set a little bit further back. Does not take away from how beautiful these models are, and the fact that, of course, when they were released, they were incredibly up to date, and they represented Muttaburrasaurus very well. And just look at these colors too. Like, you get three different options essentially. I don't know why it set them so far apart from each other.
Muttaburrasaurus is the official fossil emblem of Queensland, Australia. It's in good company next to modern emblems like koalas. I've been working on a joke. Want to hear it? Is that Muttaburrasaurus eating toast? It veggie might be. Get it? Never mind.
I don't think I've ever heard that one before. Like that Nigel Marvin dialogue option. Anyway, like I said, these still look phenomenal. They're still fantastic models in and of themselves. Look how detailed they are too, with all of those scales. The patterns look amazing. You get uh, really nice colors on the bump in particular, which really highlights that in large part it might have been used as a social display structure. And that certainly holds even more true nowadays after the latest reinterpretation, but it's beautiful. It's just beautiful. Look at these guys. The animations are really nice too. They're bipedal again, which is correct. And I think in the game they go down to being quadrupedal when they're going to drink or something, which again is a correct interpretation. They just look great. I love them so much. This game is phenomenal. Um, I do wonder. People have asked me if I think that the developers will actually update the model. They might, if memory serves me correctly. I think they did that with the Admonosaurus, like way back in the day. They gave it like the hoof-like structures that it has on its forelimbs, but I don't know if they'll do that. Obviously, I'm not going to like go there. Like, I'm not going to sit here on this video and say they absolutely should. They need to keep everything absolutely accurate. I'm not going to do that because I know that the developers have their plates full and they're working on other things like combat and stuff like that. So I'd guarantee that something like that would be pretty low on their list, which is fine. It's fine. They're not obligated to do that. The models still look amazing anyway. And again, they kind of act as a nice little time capsule that showcases what it was thought that, like, what we used to think the Muttaburrasaurus looked like. So yeah, that's Prehistoric Kingdom. Beautiful. So yeah, Muttaburrasaurus is a dinosaur that's had a very drastic change in recent memory. We had a fairly consistent design path for Muttaburrasaurus here. There wasn't too much deviation, and the reason being, it was believed that's what Muttaburrasaurus looked like. But the fact of the matter is that it had been a while since the holotype specimen of Muttaburrasaurus was analyzed, and even when it was analyzed, it wasn't done so as in depth as it was this recent time, because CT scans were used to kind of like paint a better picture of the animal. And again, more pieces of the skull were applied to the skull that we already had. And all of this kind of like recontextualized the way that we looked at Muttaburrasaurus and therefore made practically all of these guys out of date, which is a little bit unfortunate because this would have been like one of the most consistent many interpretation of videos that we have ever done. A lot of these guys, like I said earlier, they're very consistent with each other, and they all seem to be very up to date to an animal that we knew like a month ago. It's just now we learned more essentially. And that's the fun thing about paleontology. You're making conclusions based off of the evidence that you currently have. And when more evidence is applied, well, then you can expand your picture. That's one of the reasons why I really like paleontology and why I think it's such a fun field. A lot of people were obviously pretty upset about the new Muttaburrasaurus interpretation. I think most of them just didn't like this image right here, but I, for one, am very happy about it because I love learning more about these animals. I love when we get a better idea of the way that they were like in life. And Muttaburrasaurus still remains my favorite Australian dinosaur, despite the fact that it got a facelift. So, yeah, we'll call it good with that. Again, that was still a very cool list to look at. It's now very nostalgic to look at those older reconstructions now that we have a new understanding of the animal. But yeah, I do hope you guys enjoyed this video. Until next time, have an awesome day.